They say a mother's love opens every door. Mine didn't even get me past the front gate. It was a Saturday in late May. Clear sky, soft breeze, the kind of afternoon that should have smelled like joy. Instead, it smelled like roses and asphalt and something burning deep in my chest. The Crystal Haven estate stood before me in all its rented glory. White columns, draped bunting, valet attendants moving like clockwork. I'd spent months helping my daughter choose it. I'd written the deposit check myself. Now, standing at the edge of the driveway in my lavender dress and sensible heels, I realized I was the only guest without an invitation. The man at the entrance looked kind enough, though his politeness cut sharper than any insult. "Ma'am, your name?" he asked. His earpiece crackled while he scanned the list on a tablet. "Margaret Dawson," I said, steady voice, trembling hands. He frowned. The scroll kept moving, page after page, but not me. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on here." For a heartbeat, I didn't understand the words. I'd been up since dawn, curling my hair, ironing the hem of my dress, writing a little note for Allie to read before she walked down the aisle. "Don't forget to breathe, sweetheart." Dad would be proud. That note was still folded inside the pink gift bag I carried, tucked between a lace handkerchief and a frame holding her kindergarten photo. I tried again. There must be a mistake. But the young man only shook his head with the helpless smile people wear when they'd rather be anywhere else. "Private event," he murmured, already turning toward another car. Private. The word hit me like gravel in the throat. I looked through the glass doors, half open for the next line of guests. Inside, crystal chandeliers blazed like captured stars. I saw her for just an instant, my daughter, in a gown that shimmered like every dream I'd ever had for her. She was laughing, head thrown back, surrounded by people who didn't know the cost of that laughter. My breath caught. I recognized the floral archway behind her, the ivory roses I'd ordered from Bloom and Vine, the same florist who'd done my husband's memorial wreath. I recognized the linen napkins, the candles, the gold-rimmed plates, all chosen during endless phone calls, when Allie said, "Mom, I trust your taste. You always make things elegant." Every detail had my fingerprints on it, except the guest list. The music changed. Applause swelled. The doors shut again, sealing me outside like an unwanted echo. I stepped aside, pretending to check my purse so no one would notice the tears welling up. Cars kept pulling in, laughter spilling from open windows. Somewhere inside, the father-daughter dance I'd dreamed about was happening without me. My knees felt unsteady. I made my way to the edge of the sidewalk, sat on the low stone border that framed the venue's manicured lawn, and pressed my palms together just to stop them from shaking. The gift bag rested at my feet, its silver ribbon fluttering in the breeze. It looked foolish now, too small, too sentimental, too hopeful. A valet jogged past carrying someone's forgotten clutch. The scent of champagne drifted out each time the doors opened, sweet and sharp, like a celebration I could taste but not swallow. I tried calling Allie, straight to voicemail. I tried again, the same mechanical voice, cheerful and cruel. "Hi, it's Allie Cooper. Leave a message." I whispered into the phone. "I'm outside, sweetheart. I just wanted to see you walk down the aisle, that's all." Then I hung up, because begging had never suited me. For a long moment I just sat there, watching the shadows lengthen across the parking lot. Cars gleamed under the late afternoon sun, their surfaces so bright they hurt to look at. I felt invisible, like a ghost who'd shown up at her own funeral by mistake. A small laugh escaped me, dry, humorless. I paid for the music that's drowning me out. Inside, the DJ announced the newlyweds. The crowd erupted. I could almost see the confetti burst through the high windows. tiny sparks of gold against the glass. I imagined Allie's face when she tossed her bouquet, eyes sparkling, heart unburdened. Not a trace of the woman who'd once said, "Mom, I don't know what I'd do without you." Maybe she'd finally found out. I waited until dusk settled, until the laughter softened into a dull rhythm of bass and distant chatter. Then I stood, smoothed the wrinkles from my dress, and picked up the gift bag. The silver ribbon had come loose. It dangled like something tired of holding on. I walked to my car slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. Each step sounded heavier than the last. The night smelled of honeysuckle from the hedge beside the gate, sweet, almost mocking. When I reached the driver's seat, I paused before starting the engine. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. The makeup I'd practiced that morning, soft rose blush, a touch of mascara, was gone now, melted into the lines around my eyes. I took a deep breath, long and steady, the kind you take before saying something final. My purse sat on the passenger seat, bulging with folded receipts, transfer slips, and handwritten notes. Proof of everything I'd given, proof of everything that had been taken. As the music behind me swelled once more, I whispered to the empty car, "All right, Allie, you've had your moment. Now it's my turn." The engine turned over with a soft hum. Headlights sliced through the twilight. I pulled away from the glittering building and didn't look back, not once. But I felt the glow of that ballroom chasing me down the road, fading only when the last note of the song died in my memory. Somewhere between mile 1 and mile 2, the heartbreak hardened into something else. Not hate exactly. Not yet. Just a quiet, steady promise. I would never let this happen to me again. The drive home took 42 minutes. I counted every red light. Each one gave me time to wonder how a woman like me ends up locked out of her own child's happiness. By the time I turned onto Maple Lane, the sunset had gone cold and purple, and the streetlights were flickering awake like sleepy sentinels. My house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it always had. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a porch swing that still squeaked on windy nights. I pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat there until the silence grew too thick to breathe. When I finally stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry detergent. Comforting, familiar, almost cruel in its normalcy. I slipped off my shoes, set the untouched gift bag on the counter, and switched on the kitchen light. The old clock above the sink ticked like a metronome to my thoughts. I'd bought this house with my husband Tom back in 1988. He was a postal worker. I taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary. We were never rich, but we were steady. Every paycheck had a purpose. A little for groceries, a little for the mortgage, and a little, always a little, for the future we were building for our daughter. Back then, that future fit neatly into a mason jar we kept on top of the fridge. We called it Allie's Fund. Whenever we found a spare dollar, it went into that jar. Tom used to shake it once a month and grin. "Sounds like a college degree to me," he'd say. It didn't end up being college, but it became everything else. Prom dresses, field trips, her first car, and eventually the wedding we'd daydreamed about when she was barely old enough to spell the word bride. After Tom passed, heart attack, quick and unfair, I turned that jar into a savings account. I renamed it Allie's Future and kept feeding it quietly, paycheck after paycheck, year after year. I canceled cable, took extra tutoring jobs, and lived like every purchase asked me to justify its worth. Friends would joke about retirement cruises. I'd just smile and say, "Maybe someday." Someday never came. When Allie met Ryan, she called me the same night. Her voice had that girlish lilt I hadn't heard in years. "Mom, I think I found the one." She told me about his job in finance, his tailored suits, the way he opened doors for her. I was happy, God, I was so happy. She sounded alive again. I sent her my favorite casserole recipe and told her to bring him home for Sunday dinner. He was polite, smooth, the kind of man who could turn a compliment into an investment. "Mrs. Dawson, Allie tells me you've been saving for her big day," he said over dessert, laughing easily. "You're spoiling us already." I brushed it off. "A mother's right to spoil her child," I replied. If I'd been listening closer, I might have caught the faint edge in his tone, the way he said us instead of her. But I didn't. Not then. Over the next year, the planning took on a life of its own. Pinterest boards, floral mock-ups, seating charts, the whole modern circus of love. Allie's calls came daily, sometimes frantic, sometimes tender. "Mom, could you transfer the deposit to the venue today? They said spots fill up fast." "Mom, Ryan's handling the contracts. Can you just send it to his account so it's one transaction?" Every time I said yes, because that's what mothers do when they believe they're helping their child build happiness. I didn't think of it as giving away my future. I thought of it as protecting hers. The first wire transfer was $20,000, then $15,000, then another $10,000 for last-minute upgrades. My credit union app showed more withdrawals than deposits, but I told myself it was temporary. Once they were married, life would even out. They'd visit on weekends. We'd bake cookies and laugh about the chaos. I never asked for receipts. I trusted her voice more than numbers on a screen. Now, standing in my kitchen under the hum of the fluorescent light, that trust felt like the most expensive thing I'd ever bought. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the buffet cabinet and took out the folder labeled Allie Wedding. Inside were all the confirmations, printed emails, and sticky notes I'd kept. Teacher habits die hard. I flipped through them slowly, page by page, like rereading a story whose ending I already knew. There was the receipt for the florist, the invoice for the venue deposit, the bank transfer dated 6 months ago, memo line for Allie's wedding. Love, Mom. Each page felt heavier than paper should. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and sat by the window. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler ticked rhythmically across the lawn. Life, it seemed, had no idea mine had come undone. I stared at the dark reflection in the glass and whispered, almost to myself, I gave her everything. The words floated there, fragile and absurd. I wanted to believe that giving had meant something, that sacrifice had weight, that motherhood was more than a wallet with a heart attached. But love, I was learning, is only as strong as the respect it's built on, and mine had just collapsed. My phone buzzed once on the table. A new message. For a second my heart leapt. Maybe it was Allie. Maybe she'd realized the mistake. I grabbed the phone. It was a spam text about refinancing mortgages. I let out a shaky laugh. The sound was foreign, like someone else's voice. I closed the folder, slid it back into the drawer, and turned off the kitchen light. The house went dim again, washed in silver moonlight. On the counter, the pink gift bag still sat where I'd left it, the ribbon now completely untied. I thought about taking the photo out, hanging it back on the wall where it belonged. But no, not yet. That picture had earned a different ending. As I climbed the stairs to bed, one thought pulsed steady beneath the grief, quiet but undeniable. She may have taken my money, but she hasn't taken my will. Because a mother doesn't just build a future, she rebuilds it, piece by piece, when the first one burns. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, and quiet has a way of getting under your skin when your heart's making all the noise. Every tick of the clock echoed through the hallway like a small, cruel reminder of how long silence can last when someone you love doesn't call. I tried lying down, but my mind kept replaying the image of Allie under those chandeliers. Her laughter, her confidence, her complete absence of hesitation as I stood outside the doors. I used to know that girl better than I knew myself, but the woman in that gown looked like a stranger who'd borrowed my daughter's smile. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep. I came downstairs, brewed another pot of coffee, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The blue light cut through the dark like a confession booth. My email notifications blinked, mostly ads and newsletters I never read. Then I saw it. Final confirmation. Cooper wedding invoice paid in full. It was from the florist, Bloom and Vine. My name was on the billing line, Margaret Dawson, mother of the bride, but under event contact, it listed someone else, Ryan Cooper. My stomach tightened. I scrolled through the attachment, scanning the total. Every detail I'd agreed to was there. Roses, centerpieces, canopy. Except one small addition near the bottom. Additional setup requested by groom's family, paid by client's account credit. My account credit. I closed the laptop, then opened my messages. The thread with Allie hadn't been long lately, mostly one-liners, cheerful but distant. Then, buried between reminders and emojis, I found the one that split the night open. Mom, things got complicated. Ryan's parents are covering most of the costs now. The guest list changed a bit, so please don't feel bad if things look different. I'll explain soon. Love you. Things got complicated. That was all it took to erase 30 years of trust. I read it over and over until the words lost shape. Please don't feel bad. Like she'd already decided I would. Like she'd practiced saying it. The kettle clicked off behind me. I hadn't realized I'd turned it on. I poured the hot water anyway, watching the steam fog up the window. The reflection staring back at me looked tired, yes, but sharper too. There was something simmering beneath the grief, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I picked up my phone and typed a simple reply. Hi, sweetheart. I saw the florist's invoice tonight. Just checking. Did everything go okay with the payments? I noticed my name still listed as the payer. Should I contact the venue too? Then I waited. No response. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The digital silence stretched until dawn. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, the world looked the same, but I didn't. I was no longer the mother who trusted every word. I was the woman reading between them. At 8:42 my phone buzzed. For a heartbeat, I felt relief. Then I opened the message. Mom, please don't call anyone. Ryan's family has everything covered. The florist must have made a mistake. We just wanted a smaller ceremony. Less stress for you. I know you'd want that. We'll plan a family dinner soon, okay? Please just trust me on this. There it was again. Please don't. The phrase mothers use on toddlers. Only this time, it was my child telling me not to question her. I didn't answer. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Less stress for you. No, Allie. Less guilt for you. I spent the morning pacing the kitchen, then sat back down and opened the folder on my desktop labeled Wedding Planning. Inside were dozens of quotes, vendor lists, and confirmations. I started reading them not as a mother, but as an investigator. Every line was a breadcrumb leading me somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. By noon, a pattern emerged, one I couldn't ignore. Every transaction ended with payment received, courtesy of Margaret Dawson. Yet every vendor's contact led to Ryan Cooper, or A. Cooper, at a private Gmail address. My bank account had funded the entire production, but my name had been quietly replaced wherever it mattered. I printed the records and laid them across the table in rows: florist, venue, caterer, photography. My coffee had gone cold by the time I reached the last page, but I wasn't cold anymore. I was burning from the inside out. That afternoon I tried calling Allie again. Straight to voicemail. The third time it didn't even ring. Blocked. That was the moment my grief folded neatly into something heavier, more deliberate. I walked out to the porch, sat on the old swing, and stared at the empty street. A group of kids rode their bikes past, their laughter cutting through the quiet like bright ribbons. Somewhere down the block, a wind chime tinkled softly. Ordinary sounds, gentle sounds, and yet they all felt foreign, as if the world had moved on without asking my permission. I took a deep breath, pulled my cardigan tighter, and whispered, "All right, Allie, if I can't reach you with love, I'll reach you with truth." The words surprised even me, not because they were angry, but because they were calm. That calm scared me more than rage ever could. Rage flares and dies, calm plans. As the daylight faded, I began making a list. A teacher's instinct. Neat columns, bullet points, order. Call the event planner. Confirm every contract and transaction. Collect receipts, invoices, and messages. Stop assuming people tell the truth just because you raised them to. By nightfall, the list was pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. I stared at it one last time before heading upstairs. The house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something was waking up inside its walls, like the part of me that had been asleep for too long was finally stretching its limbs. Before turning out the light, I opened my journal and wrote a single line across the page. Love built the house. Betrayal lit the match. Then I closed the book, placed it on the nightstand, and let the quiet settle over me, not as a burden this time, but as a promise. The next morning felt like walking through someone else's life. The coffee smelled the same. The mail sat in its usual pile. The sun slipped through the kitchen blinds just as it always did. Yet nothing was familiar anymore. Every sound was louder, every silence heavier. I stood at the sink, hands wrapped around my mug, staring at the backyard fence Tom had built 25 years ago. The paint was peeling at the corners, but it was still standing, stubborn, weathered, unbent. I envied that fence. A car rolled past outside. Somewhere a radio played a love song I used to hum when Allie was little. I'd sing it while brushing her hair, twisting it into braids before school. She'd giggle and tell me I was off key. God, she had the sweetest laugh, the kind that filled a house. I tried to remember the last time I'd heard it, really heard it, and came up empty. By afternoon I couldn't stay inside any longer. The walls were whispering with memories I wasn't ready to hear. I grabbed my keys, stepped into the car, and drove without thinking. Maybe part of me wanted to prove it was real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. When I turned onto Willow Road, the venue came into view again. Crystal Haven, proud and pristine, as if it had nothing to answer for. The parking lot was empty now except for a few workers packing away leftover decorations. I parked near the curb, heart pounding in my throat, and just watched. They were taking down the arch, my arch, the one I'd chosen, ivory and blush, with tiny crystal beads hanging like morning dew. I remembered the catalog photo. Allie had circled it with a pink pen. This one, Mom. It feels magical. I had smiled and said yes, already planning which corners of my savings I could trim to afford it. Now a stranger was folding those same flowers into plastic bins like they were ordinary trash. I got out of the car, moving slowly, unsure why I was even there. Maybe I wanted a souvenir. Maybe I wanted proof of the damage. The air smelled faintly of champagne and wilted roses. My heels crunched over scattered petals on the pavement. One of the workers glanced up. "Oh, ma'am. Sorry, we're closed for cleanup." I nodded, forcing a polite smile. "I know. I just wanted a minute." He hesitated, then went back to stacking boxes. I walked closer to the doors, stopping where the sunlight hit the glass just right. I could see my reflection layered over the faint outline of the ballroom inside. Confetti on the floor, a few chairs turned sideways, a champagne flute tipped on its side. Ghosts of a party that had gone on without me. For a second, I pressed my palm against the cool glass, as if I could touch the version of my life still dancing on the other side. Then I let my hand drop. I sat down on the same low stone ledge by the curb, the same spot where I'd waited the day before. The wind had picked up, tugging at my cardigan, rustling the leaves overhead. I should have gone home, but something in me needed to see this part through, to sit in the ashes before I could rise. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A text from Linda, my neighbor. "Hey, saw your lights on late last night. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, unsure what truth would even sound like. I typed, "Yeah, just couldn't sleep," then deleted it. Typed again. "No, not really." Deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "Do you have time for coffee later? I could use a friend." She replied in seconds. "Always." I tucked the phone away and looked up at the cloudless sky. There was a strange kind of peace in that moment. Not comfort exactly, but acceptance. The worst had already happened. The people I'd trusted most had shut me out of my own story. There was nothing left to lose, except fear. I reached down, picked up a stray rose petal, and rubbed it between my fingers until it crumbled. The texture reminded me of paper, fragile, thin, easy to tear. Love, I realized, isn't destroyed in an instant. It's worn down, petal by petal, until one day you're left holding dust. A car honked somewhere in the distance. The spell broke. I stood, brushed off my skirt, and walked back to the car. As I slid into the driver's seat, a small laugh escaped me, not from humor, but disbelief. "Well," I whispered to no one, "I suppose that's closure." But it wasn't. Not yet. When I got home, Linda was already waiting on my porch, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She didn't ask questions right away. She just handed me one, sat beside me, and let the silence fill the space between us. After a long sip, she finally said, "You look like someone who's been holding her breath too long." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I was." She nodded, her eyes kind but steady. "Then start breathing, honey. Start by telling me everything." And so I did. From the first deposit to the locked door, every word spilled out between sips of lukewarm coffee. When I finished, Linda didn't gasp or curse or pity me. She just sat there, quiet for a beat, then said, "So what are you going to do about it?" I stared at the steam rising from my cup. "I'm not sure yet, but I can tell you what I won't do." She tilted her head. "And what's that?" "I won't stay silent." The words came out soft, but they carried weight. They hung in the air between us, solid and certain, as the last bit of sunlight slipped across the porch. For the first time since that awful afternoon, I felt the faintest pulse of control return to my chest. Not anger, not revenge, not yet. Just a steady heartbeat reminding me I was still here and I wasn't finished. Linda didn't say much after that. She didn't need to. Some friends are like mirrors. They don't give you answers. They just reflect back the strength you've forgotten you still have. When she left that evening, she gave my hand a firm squeeze and said, "You've always been the honest one, Maggie. Don't let them make you doubt that." Then she was gone, and the house was mine again, quiet, steady, waiting for direction. I sat at the kitchen table long after sunset, surrounded by silence and the faint hum of the refrigerator. My coffee had gone cold, but my resolve hadn't. For the first time in weeks, my thoughts felt sharp, clear, purposeful. I pulled the wedding folder from the drawer again, its edges already softened from how many times I'd opened it, and began to sort everything into piles: invoices, bank transfers, emails, handwritten notes. Every piece of paper told a part of the story, but I wanted the full picture. When I was still teaching, I used to tell my students, if you can't find the truth, organize the facts until it reveals itself. I hadn't realized how much I'd need that lesson myself. I spread the papers across the table, row by row, until the surface disappeared beneath them. There it was, the entire wedding, laid bare in ink and numbers. Every flower, every candle, every charge, every cent that came from my account. But what stood out most wasn't what I'd paid for. It was what I hadn't authorized. A few extra charges, a new set of vendor updates. Someone had adjusted the contracts after I'd signed them. I leaned closer, tracing the faint lines of Ryan's signature beside my own. He'd added himself as co-payer, quietly, neatly, as if it had always been that way. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. Anger was dangerous. It clouded reason, and reason was the only weapon I had. So I did what I've always done when the world tilts off balance. I made a plan. The next morning, I called the florist first. My voice was polite, my tone friendly, like any mother following up on her daughter's big day. "Hi, this is Margaret Dawson. I just wanted to confirm payment details for the Cooper wedding. I'm updating my files." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Oh, Mrs. Dawson, I was told you weren't involved with the event anymore." The words hit like a slap. "Not involved?" I repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Cooper said you'd stepped away for personal reasons, but everything went beautifully, I promise." I smiled tightly, though she couldn't see it. I'm sure it did. After I hung up, I sat very still for a long moment, the phone resting in my palm like proof of something rotten. I dialed another number. Rebecca Miles, the event planner, the same woman who'd emailed me invoices 6 months ago. "Rebecca, it's Margaret Dawson," I said when she answered. "Oh, Mrs. Dawson, I didn't expect to hear from you. Everything turned out lovely, didn't it?" "I wouldn't know," I said evenly. "I wasn't invited." Silence. A long, uncomfortable silence that told me more than words ever could. Finally, she said, Oh my God. I thought Ryan told us you couldn't travel for health reasons." My jaw tightened. "Did he also tell you who paid your deposit?" Another pause. "You did. Every cent." "Then I think you understand my confusion." Her voice dropped, low and guilty. "Mrs. Dawson, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I just followed the contact sheet they sent. Everything went through his account the last few months. I didn't think to question it." "Don't apologize," I said softly. "You've actually helped me more than you know." When I hung up, I felt the first flicker of something that almost resembled peace. Not because the truth was comforting, it wasn't, but because it was finally visible. Lies are powerful only when they hide in shadows. Once you drag them into daylight, they shrink. That afternoon, I drove to the local print shop and asked them to make copies of every invoice, every receipt, every transfer confirmation. The clerk looked curious, but didn't ask questions. When I got home, I labeled a new folder, Truth. Inside it, I placed the documents in perfect order. On the front page, I clipped a handwritten note. If they ever doubt me, this will speak. The next day, I made one more call to my lawyer, Charles Reed. We'd gone to the same church for 20 years. He'd handled Tom's estate after he passed. A decent man, blunt but fair. When he picked up, I said, "Charles, I think I need your help with something personal." "Personal or legal?" he asked. At this point, I'm not sure there's a difference. I told him everything, every transfer, every false excuse, every door that had been closed to me. When I finished, there was a pause, then a sigh that sounded like disappointment wrapped in anger. "Maggie," he said finally, "that's theft. Dressed in wedding lace, but theft all the same." "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just want the truth written down somewhere that can't be erased." "Then we'll start there," he said. "Send me everything. I'll draft a notice of claim. If they're smart, they'll settle quietly." After the call, I sat back in my chair, staring out the window. The afternoon light was fading into amber, brushing over the photos on the mantel. Tom's smile, Allie at graduation, all those frozen moments of pride. I traced her face with my eyes and whispered, "You've made your choices, sweetheart. Now I'll make mine." I didn't cry. Not this time. Tears wouldn't change anything. The only thing that mattered now was the record, the story told in ink and signatures. The truth had a paper trail, and I was following it, one document at a time. That night, before bed, I looked at the folder again. It sat on the kitchen counter like a heartbeat. Steady. Waiting. I placed my hand on it gently and said out loud, "This is not anger. This is evidence." And for the first time since the wedding, I slept. Not peacefully, not fully, but enough to dream of something unfamiliar. Strength. When I woke the next morning, the world looked different. Not brighter exactly, just clearer. The kind of clarity that comes after a storm, when the air smells sharp and the ground still glistens with what's been washed away. I brewed my coffee slowly, letting the sound of the drip fill the silence. Every morning before this one had felt like waiting. This one felt like beginning. The folder sat on the counter where I'd left it, the word truth written across the front in thick black ink. I took it with me to the porch, sat down on the swing, and began reading through each page again. Not for information this time, but for confirmation. Each line was proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that generosity, without boundaries, can turn into a weapon. By mid-morning, I called Charles again. "Send the letters," I told him. "All of them." He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "All right, Maggie. Give them 7 days. Then we'll see how honest they really are." 7 days. A week of waiting. A week of remembering who I was before disappointment softened my edges. That afternoon I drove to the post office, Tom's old workplace. The clerk behind the counter still remembered me. "Mrs. Dawson," he said with a gentle nod. "Been a while." I smiled, passing him the thick envelope addressed to Allison Cooper and Ryan Cooper, CO 1842 Maple Ridge Drive. The words "certified mail" stamped in red looked almost poetic. Accountability printed and posted. When I got home, I sat in the living room, staring at the wedding photograph that had been printed in the local paper. Community news. Local couple celebrates elegant spring ceremony. There she was, my daughter, glowing, flawless. The caption didn't mention the woman who'd made it all possible. It didn't mention the checkbooks, or the sleepless nights, or the heart that had paid for every petal. I whispered to the frame, "You wanted a picture-perfect story, Allie. Now you'll get the full one." The next few days crawled. I kept busy, cleaned the attic, sorted old boxes, baked bread I didn't eat. Linda dropped by each evening with updates from the neighborhood, pretending not to notice how often I checked my phone. "You'll hear something soon," she said softly. "People like that panic when silence starts to cost them." She was right. On the 5th day, a message arrived. Not from Allie, but from Ryan. Short, polished, empty. "Mrs. Dawson, we received your attorney's letter. This seems to be a misunderstanding. Let's not escalate family matters publicly. We'll call when things settle. I read it twice, then set the phone down, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Misunderstanding. That word again. The favorite mask of liars. I didn't reply. Some truths don't need echoing. Instead, I called Charles. He finally blinked, I said. Good, he replied. That means he's scared. Keep everything documented, every word, every timestamp. So I did. I wrote down each call, each message, each attempt to dodge responsibility. I wasn't collecting revenge anymore. I was collecting history. 2 days later, Rebecca, the event planner, called me unexpectedly. Her voice trembled. Mrs. Dawson, I've been thinking about our conversation. It's been bothering me. I just wanted you to know. I saved all the correspondence, the emails, the payment logs. If you ever need them, I can provide copies. I closed my eyes, grateful. Thank you, Rebecca. That means more than you know. Honestly, she added, what they did was wrong. Everyone in this business knows how much you put into that wedding. They shouldn't have done this to you. After we hung up, I felt something warm stir beneath the armor. Not joy exactly, but validation. The truth was starting to breathe on its own. By the end of that week, word had begun to leak, not through gossip, I hadn't told a soul, but through whispers carried by vendors, planners, and one too curious social coordinator who loved a good scandal. By the following Monday, the same small-town paper that had printed the wedding photo ran a quiet retraction notice in its society column. Just 2 sentences. Clarification. Payment acknowledgments for the Cooper wedding have been amended to reflect full sponsorship by the bride's mother, Mrs. Margaret Dawson. It was a small line, easily missed, but I saw it, and so did they. That evening, my phone rang. For the first time in weeks, it was Allie. The moment I saw her name, my hands started to shake. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything that still needed saying. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, she began, her voice soft, hesitant. Can we talk? I'm listening, I said. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she said quickly. Ryan said it was better to keep things simple. His family. They wanted control over the guest list. I thought if I pushed back it would cause problems before the wedding. I didn't know it would go this far. I stayed silent, letting her words tumble over themselves. She mistook my quiet for sympathy. Please, she whispered. I'm sorry. Are you? I asked, calm, even. Or are you just embarrassed now that people know? She started crying, real tears or rehearsed ones. I couldn't tell. Mom, please don't make this worse. I exhaled slowly. I'm not making it worse, Allie. I'm making it accurate. Mama, stop, I said gently, and the word landed like a full stop. You made choices. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not blind either. I'm not your wallet. I'm not your backup plan. I'm your mother, and that used to mean something. The line went quiet except for her breathing. Finally, she whispered, What do you want me to do? I thought about that for a long second. Do what you should have done from the start, I said. Tell the truth. To everyone. Then, maybe, we can start again. She promised she would. She promised a lot of things that night. But I'd learned that promises, like flowers, are only beautiful until they start to wilt. When the call ended, I sat on the porch again, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. The wind was soft, the air smelled of rain, and for the first time, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel small. I felt steady. Justice, I realized, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet sound of your own heartbeat after you've done the right thing, no matter how late it came. A week passed after that phone call, and for the first time in months, the house felt light again. The air wasn't thick with waiting. I could breathe without listening for footsteps that would never come. Each morning, I brewed my coffee, watered the plants, and watched the mail carrier drop envelopes into the box with a small nod. It was ordinary, quiet, and mercifully mine. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. Thick, white stationery. My name written in a handwriting I knew as well as my own. Allison Cooper. I held it for a long moment before opening it, tracing each curve of her pen. Inside was a short note, simple, almost childlike. Mom, you were right. I told the truth. I've returned every dollar. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you'll remember I was scared, not cruel. I love you. Allie. Folded with the letter was a cashier's check, the exact amount I had given her, down to the penny. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but all I felt was a deep, quiet release. Money could be replaced. Trust could not. Yet in that small gesture, the letter, the handwriting, the effort to make it right, I saw the faint outline of the daughter I used to know. That evening, Linda came by with pie. She sat on the porch while I read the letter aloud. When I finished, she leaned back and sighed. You going to forgive her? I smiled softly. Eventually, but not today. Linda nodded. That's fair. The next morning, I called Charles and told him to close the file. You sure? He asked. I am, I said. The money's returned, the lessons learned, that's all I needed. He chuckled gently. You've done what most people can't, Maggie. You made them face themselves. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped hiding from my own reflection. The days rolled on. The headlines moved to other weddings, other smiles. But every so often, a message would arrive from Allie, small, careful steps toward rebuilding something fragile. How's your garden? Thinking of you today. Miss your lasagna. I didn't answer all of them, but I read each one. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a door you unlock once. It's a gate you open an inch at a time, only when your hands stop shaking. By late summer, the town began planning its annual charity gala, the same one I'd helped organize for years. The coordinator, an old colleague, called to ask if I'd come back to volunteer. I hesitated, then said yes. It felt right. A small step toward living again. The night of the event, I stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Familiar faces, kind smiles, soft chatter. Halfway through the evening, I saw her. Allie, standing by the door in a simple blue dress, clutching a donation envelope. She looked nervous, almost shy. When our eyes met, she froze. I walked toward her slowly. The crowd seemed to fade around us, voices dipping to whispers. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. I didn't know if I should come. You're here, I replied, my tone gentle but even. That's what matters. She held out the envelope. It's for the charity fund, in Dad's name. I took it, feeling the paper tremble slightly in her hand. He'd like that, I said. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry for everything. I don't know how to fix it. I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her. Not the bride who'd locked me out, not the stranger who'd signed my name away, just my daughter, flawed, frightened, still learning. You can't fix the past, sweetheart, I said softly, but you can stop repeating it. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. I will, I promise. I placed my hand on her cheek, wiping one away with my thumb. "Then we'll be all right. Not perfect, just all right." For a moment, she smiled through the tears, and I saw a flicker of that little girl again, the one who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen while I cooked Sunday dinner. That memory, fragile as glass, was enough. Later that night, after the event ended, I drove home beneath a quiet sky. The moon hung low, silver against the dark, steady as an old friend. When I reached the porch, the wind had turned cool, rustling the trees just enough to sound like applause. I sat down, closed my eyes, and listened. People think revenge is loud, dramatic, fiery, full of spectacle. They're wrong. True revenge, the kind that leaves you whole, isn't about destruction. It's about dignity. It's the moment you reclaim your peace and realize they can't take it from you anymore. I looked out at the garden Tom and I had planted so long ago. The flowers were blooming again, wild, imperfect, stubborn. A few petals had fallen onto the path, but the stems stood tall. Life, it seemed, knew how to keep growing even after it had been cut back. I whispered into the night, more to myself than anyone. I gave her everything once, but this time I kept something for me. The wind shifted gently, carrying the scent of lavender through the air. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and let the peace settle in my bones. Because in the end, that's what survival really is. Not forgetting what broke you, but learning to live beautifully around the cracks. And as the stars came out one by one, I smiled, small, certain, and finally free.